Hello and welcome. My name is Carter Jones and I'm the Special Projects Coordinator with the South Carolina State Firefighters Association. We're here today in the city of North Charleston at their fire museum, and I wish to issue a special thank you to the staff of the fire museum for allowing us to do this video within the museum itself, surrounded by some beautiful antique apparatus. Today I'm here to tell a story that has been lost in time, and it's about firefighters. Firefighters that were involved in the Civil War that impacted the city of New York as well as South Carolina. Let's go back in time. In late 1860 and early 1861, storm clouds were brewing over our country, and President Abraham Lincoln was concerned about the potential conflicts that may lead into war. And his fears were realized on April the 12th, 1861, when the Confederate soldiers fired on the federal compound of Fort Sumter. And 3 days later, President Abraham Lincoln issued an executive order requesting 75,000 volunteers to fill the ranks of the Union Army. President Lincoln knew a young fellow by the name of Elmer Ellsworth. He was a colonel, and he requested Colonel Ellsworth's assistance in recruiting volunteers for the Union Army. Well, it's interesting that Colonel Ellsworth was never a fireman, but he knew the work of firemen. And he reached out to the firemen in the city of New York because, one, he knew that they were well disciplined, that they were brave, and you could count on them to do a job. Well, he's quoted as saying, "I want the New York firemen, for there are none more efficient men in this country, and none with whom I can do so much." I thought that was quite neat. Well, within 24 hours, about 11 or 1,200 New York firemen had volunteered to serve in the Union Army. And Colonel Ellsworth began to put together a well-disciplined team of troops. As the days went by and they began to move south, they approached the city of Alexandria, Virginia. And as they entered that city, Colonel Ellsworth was leading the group. He saw a Confederate flag flying over a tavern, and his anger rose up in him, and he raced up the stairs to the second or third floor and reached out and ripped that Confederate flag from its flagpole. Well, as he descended the stairs, the owner of the tavern, whose last name was Jackson, shot him with a shotgun and killed him immediately. Well, Colonel Ellsworth was not in the stairwell alone. There was a young corporal by the name of Brownell, and Brownell shot the tavern owner and killed him instantly. Well, the troops were somewhat demoralized, but that didn't stop them. They had a mission. And as they moved further, they came to Manassas, and we are recorded to have had the first Battle of Bull Run, or the Battle of Manassas. Quite a few of the New York firemen were killed, wounded, or held captive. Now, the interesting thing about these New York firemen, prior to Colonel Ellsworth's death, he had outfitted them in some flamboyant uniforms rather than using the standard Union Army uniforms. These were fashioned after the French army who fought in Algiers. They had baggy gray pants with blue stripes, a red jacket. They wore a fez with tassels. They had tan leggings. It was an unusual looking crowd, and it's been speculated that their colorful uniforms may have contributed to the devastation this group experienced in battle, because they stood out like a sore thumb. But colorful uniforms nevertheless. Well, those who were held captive were eventually sent to Richmond to a Confederate prison. And they stayed there until about the middle of September, and they were shipped down to the city of Charleston. They were placed out at Castle Pinckney. It was a 19th century fortress, but it was too small. And they made arrangements at the city jail on the peninsula to house these New York firemen, whose were referred to as the first New York Zouaves. Now, I'm a South Carolina boy. I don't speak French, and there are other pronunciations for that, but for purposes of us today, they are called the New York Zouaves. Now, they were held prisoner in the city jail until about December the 11th, when a major conflagration occurred within the city of Charleston. And many of these prisoners had to escape, just escape barely with their lives. And they were shipped again out to Castle Pinckney, where they remained until the spring of 1862. Now, firemen have an unusual sense of humor. We're told that the New York Zouaves worked well with the guards at Castle Pinckney. In fact, they were allowed to eat the same food as the guards. They were allowed to wander in and out of the compound in which they were held prisoners, and there was a good relationship. In fact, the New York firemen referred to themselves as the Castle Pinckney Brotherhood. Well, in September of this year marked the 155th anniversary of the New York Zouaves being held captive or prisoners at Castle Pinckney. Our state association realized that during September, the National Volunteer Fire Council was hosting a conference in North Charleston. And we thought it'd be appropriate to commemorate the 155th anniversary of this event by taking a group of officers and members of the Firemen's Association of New York State out to the Castle Pinckney, located in the middle of the harbor of Charleston, about 3 miles from Fort Sumter, actually. And we were able to make arrangements with the Charleston Fire Department and the City of North Charleston Fire Department to utilize their fireboats to take these groups of fire service folks out there to see the castle, the fortress, and where their men 155 years earlier had been held prisoner. Unfortunately, the Castle Pinckney, the fortress itself, has fallen in disrepair. It's interesting that we found a photograph of the New York Zouaves outside of their compound. And we have a sign here, a replica of the sign that was over their compound. The number 1 indicates the compound or the facilities for the prisoners. They were number 1, and it went on number 2, number 3, number 4 for the guards' housing, for the mess hall, and other facilities on the prison grounds. But the New York firemen had signs painted. NYFD, of course, for the New York Fire Department, and then in their unusual sense of humor, they referred to their compound as a Hotel des Zouaves, and we have a replica here today. The photograph, and you'll see it in this video, shows them standing in front of the sign and in their compound, but you'll have to notice that a number of the firemen were wearing their badges. And we're told through research that many firemen who served during the Civil War for both the South and the North always took their badges as a means of identification. And you can see very clearly in the photograph the badges of these firemen. Now, while we were out in the harbor on the fireboats, it gave the New York firemen an opportunity to again feel that Castle Pinckney brotherhood. And the South Carolina Firefighters Association used this as an opportunity, a gesture, if you will, to extend the hand of brotherhood. Because we know whether in war or in the battle against our common enemy, fire, it's an awesome bond, a friendship, a brotherhood like no other.